Chapter 25. Intelligence is not to make no mistakes, but quickly to see how to make them good. Bertolt Brecht, German playwright. Thankfully, the rain had stopped by the time we left for the Welcome Building. On the way there, Fritz and I stopped by a market and bought 5 Ostmarks worth of rope and also a little food we could eat while working on the tunnel. When he asked where the money had come from, I asked my own question instead. How involved was Papa in the resistance? Was he only talking to those who were fighting, or was there more? Fritz frowned. Why are you asking that now? Because I already knew the answer and needed him to confirm it. Maybe my father hadn't led any marches or put up protest flyers, but that woman last night knew his name and knew him well enough to recognize me after at least 4 years. There had to be reasons for that. As we walked, Fritz said, Father promised Mother he wouldn't break any laws, but he bent that promise as far as he could. I know he spent a lot of time next door with Eric Kraus, helping him build support against the government. They used to hold meetings there, one so secret he denied that they had ever happened, even after I told him I could hear them through my bedroom wall. Why do you ask? Last night I met someone he used to know, I simply said, which reminded him that he hadn't scolded me for a while, but even as angry as he still was, I'd also gotten him to admit the pulley was invaluable. He thought it would only take a few pieces of wood and the rope to get it working. Fritz grabbed some old wooden slats from the same lot where I'd stolen the pulley and bundled them with our garden tools to carry them into the garden. Once it was safe to bring everything into the basement, he stood the 2 longest pieces of wood on their ends and attached them at the top with the 3rd piece of wood. He built stands for the base and said I would have to anchor them with my weight while I pulled the bucket up, or else the whole thing would tip over on me. I wish I could make it more permanent, he said, but I think we should lay this down flat each night, so it doesn't draw any attention in case someone does peek in the windows. I attached the pulley at the top and ran the rope through it. The other end was also tied to the bucket beside me. When I pulled down on the rope, the bucket handle lifted up. Let's test it, I said, already anticipating how helpful this was going to be. Fritz climbed into the shelter and I lowered the bucket beside him. He filled it with dirt and then told me to raise it up. Even though it was heavier than the buckets I usually hauled up the ladder, the pulley bore most of the weight and took less of my effort than before. I raised the bucket up to eye level, then dumped it on the basement floor beside me and lowered it again. Fritz and I worked this way until he announced all the extra dirt was gone from the shelter. He suggested he could go to work digging while I got rid of the dirt in the basement. So I did. I first lowered the pulley system and tied the bucket and emptied the new dirt from the basement out into the garden patch. The work seemed much easier today, maybe because I wasn't already exhausted from hauling it up and down the ladder. Only an hour of work easily convinced me that I had done the right thing by sneaking out to get the pulley. By midday, the extra dirt was mostly gone from the basement and spread out in the garden area. Fritz would have more dirt after lunch, but for now I decided to work outside to make it look as if we were progressing in the garden. I was accustomed to the constant city noises in Berlin, but here, set off so far from any main roads, it was very quiet. So it was easy to detect footsteps of someone arriving from the alley, the same way I had come when I first found this building. I took a quick glance back to be sure the boards were covering the windows, but I already knew they were. Fritz and I were very careful to always remember that, and I knew he wouldn't come out unless he was sure nobody else was around. So I turned back to my work and tried not to appear too concerned. Any look of guilt or stress would certainly give me away, because if my only purpose here was gardening, I was allowed to be here. But who I saw emerge from the alley confused me. It was Anna. Her mother was with her, carrying a basket covered with a cloth. Mama thought she saw you working here, Anna said cheerfully. After seeing you at the restaurant yesterday, we walked this way home and thought something looked different here. I stopped working and stared up at her while shielding my eyes from the sun at her back. She was smiling and acting as friendly as always, the same Anna as she had been before her brother's death, or almost the same. Something seemed different. I couldn't quite place it. It was like she was too friendly. working too hard to pretend everything was normal. It probably wasn't much different than I had acted on our last day at school together when I first told her about this garden. Maybe she felt as awkward as I did about repairing our friendship. After Peter's accident, Frau Warner chose her words carefully. Maybe she wanted everyone to believe that escaping one's country by hiding out in a specially designed car was an accident, or more likely that's how the Stasi had told her to describe it. You brought us some bread from your mother. That was so kind and we never thanked her. I sat back on my heels. My mother had to leave town to take care of my grandmother. Yes, I had heard that. Frau Warner casually looked around. We wondered if there's anything you and your brother might need while she's gone. Where's Fritz, by the way? I thought he was helping you garden. He had to run an errand, I said. He may not be back for a while. She accepted my lie just as I had told it without batting an eye. Ah, well, please tell him hello for me. I know he and Peter were friends, and it would have been nice to see him too. Is there some place I could set this basket? It has cheese and crackers and some homemade shortbread. I thought you might like that until your mother is home to cook again. It all sounded delicious, so good in fact that I'd have snatched the basket off her arm and inhaled the food with my filthy fingers if I didn't think it would draw some unwanted attention my way. Instead, I pointed to a flattened rock near the pond. You can put it there, and thank you. The gratitude I felt could not be expressed enough with words. If only she knew how much the food meant to us. While her mother walked over with the basket, Anna crouched near me. I returned to working on some weeds, but that didn't stop her from talking. In a low voice she said, On the last day of school when you sat by me at lunch, I knew you were just trying to be nice and I was horrible in response. I want you to know I'm sorry about that. I looked up. I'm sorry too for not telling you about Peter's plans as soon as I heard. Maybe if I told you sooner. That wasn't your fault. Tears filled her eyes, but she blinked them away. Mama thinks it would be good for me to get out of the apartment more. So if you'd like, I could come by sometime and help here in the garden. Actually, I didn't like that idea at all, but how could I refuse Anna's polite offer without raising suspicions? I smiled as kindly as I could manage. It's hot and you'll get filthy and it's boring, but if you really want to. Thank you, Gerda. She seemed genuinely happy about what little I had offered, which made me wish it could have been possible. I know a lot about gardens, so I can be helpful and we can fix some of your mistakes before you get seeds planted. My eyes narrowed. What mistakes? Even in my fake garden, I felt slighted by her suggestion that I might have done a poor job. She chuckled. Well, you can't just cover the weeds over with dirt, silly. I don't know where you got this dirt from, but it won't fix the problem for long. Pretty soon the weeds will just pop up through the new dirt stronger than ever. I didn't answer her. Instead, I glared, which I shouldn't have done. But she had no idea how hard I'd worked and how important it was that I get rid of our extra dirt. If I couldn't figure out that problem, we would scarcely be caught. We would surely be caught. I wasn't angry at her, just frustrated with myself. But all I could do was let her walk away. After I was sure she and her mother had left, I made my way back inside the building where Fritz had been watching us. I heard it all, he said, even before I could say a word. Maybe the next rainstorm will even the fresh dirt out with the old, I suggested. We got some rain last night and nothing improved, Fritz said. Whether we cover the weeds or bare ground, it still looks like fresh dirt. We can't use it out here anymore. He was right. We would have to do the hard work of removing the weeds, which was bad enough. But the second problem was much harder. What would we do with all the extra dirt?